Hello everyone, Cannonlowy here with another Path of Exile build guide for anyone who is interested. My last build guide, the very first one that I made, was received mostly positively. I mean, there's only so much feedback that I've gotten from that. But I decided to show the build that I decided to do for Metamorph League, and that is using claws with Cyclone and the Impaled Champion stuff. So, Cyclone is pretty much, as far as I'm aware, the most widely known used melee skill. So what makes my build more unique is that it uses claws, and I don't think most people use claws for Cyclone, and the reason why I wanted to use Cyclone with claws is that, as you can see here, it does life and mana gain on hit if you use Gemini claws. If you want more life gain on hit and potentially more damage, Imperial claws are probably better, but I use mana. I don't have mana leech on this character, so I'm forced to use Gemini claws. So going over the gear, getting a good pair of spike gloves that have attack speed, flat physical damage, and that resist life is a good idea. And I'm using Feral's Furs, so you're going to have to, if you decide to use Feral's Furs, you're going to have Aspect of the Cat somewhere for that free aura. And it doesn't really matter what enchantment you use on it for the gloves. Now for the boots, having the attack and cast speed, if you've killed recently, increase attack speed, why not? Just get movement speed, life, and resist. If you want, getting elusive Tailwind boots, they're pretty expensive, but if you can get them, those are probably going to be the very top end boots that you can get. I didn't really know that much about Tailwind elusive boots until somewhat recently, so I didn't bother to get those. But those would probably be pretty ideal if you can fit them in. I have Perseverance because I have Fortify support on my Cyclones, and what Perseverance does is that it gives you Onslaught while you have Fortify. That gives me free Onslaught all the time, and it also has 1% attack damage per armor and 300 armor and evasion rating. So this actually gives me a quite sizable amount of damage, believe it or not. If I have all my Flasks up, it will give me like 70% increased damage or so, which is pretty juicy. But if you don't want to use Perseverance, just a leather belt with Elder Influence, percent max life, and flat life is probably going to overall be just as good, if not better in many cases. So I am using Feral's Furs. This was by far the most expensive piece of equipment for this build other than the weapons, but we'll get into the weapons in a bit. So what Feral's Furs does is that when you have Aspect of the Cat, it reserves no mana, and it also gives you maximum frenzy charges and power charges whenever you switch from Cat Stealth. So the Beastry auras, what they do is that they swap between two buffs, and for the Cat, it does increase crit chance as well as avoid damage, and are harder to see, but that probably doesn't really matter. And then it switches to increased attack and cast speed. So when it switches, it gives me my maximum charges, and that way I don't need to have some kind of special thing to generate those charges. But you can use Blood Rage to get your frenzy charges, so that isn't really a problem. It's mostly for the power charges for myself. This piece of equipment was by far, when I say by far the most expensive, I Warmonger actually paid 13 exalts for a 6-link of this, and then I just divined it to try to get the maximum life and whatever armor and evasion I could get on it. So for the rings, life, I actually needed some strength, and then whatever resists, and I even had a slot for percent increased damage for a little bit extra. But having a flat physical damage roll is preferred though. So if I didn't have mana on here, which is pretty much completely unnecessary, get flat fizz on there to get your maximum damage increase. And then for this ring, flat fizz, increased damage, resist, and all that. So pretty standard. And then for my amulet, a large amount of intelligence, because these claws actually require quite a bit of intelligence, and as a duelist, it's kind of hard to get that. So pretty much maximum int for that. The maximum energy shield is pretty much a wasted node, honestly. And then resist. And if you can find, I forget if the crit multi is a prefix or suffix, but if you can fit crit multi on your amulet, that will increase your damage quite substantially. And then for the helmet, Stark Kianja's head is a solid choice. It gives you dexterity, which honestly isn't really necessary, but it also gives you attack speed, crit chance, evasion, pretty high evasion, and then high life. So that's a pretty decent choice, and pretty cheap to actually get a pretty good roll on it. But if you want to go above and beyond, if you get a helmet that has reduced enemies take increased percent physical damage, that will probably give you more damage than what this helmet gives you. And this build has quite a bit of sources of increased physical damage, so that would probably not give you as much as an elemental helmet would for an elemental build because of diminishing returns on that. So going into the weapons, these were the best weapons that I could get, and according to Warmonger, we spent like 10 exalts or more crafting Gemini claws for stuff, and this was by far the best claw here. 72% increased physical damage, and then I did an exalt craft for the 125% at the bottom, a tier 1 flat fizz, physical damage while dual wielding, crit multi, and then ironically I had chance to gain onslaught, which is completely worthless to me, and attack speed. So what I was going for my claws was flat physical damage, the Warlord's mod of getting crit multi and increased physical damage, the flat increased physical damage, the crit multi suffix, attack speed, and physical damage while dual wielding. So this one's pretty much perfect of what I wanted other than the onslaught mod. And I wanted it for both of them. Unfortunately, the other claw didn't turn out as well. I got a maximum attack speed, good flat fizz, a really low percentage physical damage, which is really disappointing. That's pretty much the main reason why this claw is not really the best. It's decent, but not good enough for, not as good as I would like. And then I did a quality craft on it. And on here, yeah, I'm not sure if I could have fit quality on there or not. Oh yeah, I wanted to do attack speed and quality, I do believe, for that one. And then I had Intimidate. Well, I have Intimidate on Awakened Melee Physical Damage, so that was a pretty worthless mod to me as well. So that's what I came up with. On the offhand, I have a Sinvictus for Rampage, and that is very useful. So, onto the gem setup. So this build has many different defensive layers, and that's probably the highlight of this build, is how many defensive layers that I have. So this character has armor and evasion, a pretty substantial amount. So when I have my Flasks on, I can get up to 83% estimated physical damage reduction and 60% chance to evade. So that's pretty sweet. But I also have other things, so if I can find them. So I have Vaal Molten Shell with cast when damage taken, with level 10. And then I have Aspect of the Cat itself, gives you that chance to avoid all damage from hits when you have Cat Stealth on. And then I also have a decent chance to block, which is 38%. And at one point I did have, if you can fit it in, Nightblade support with Whirling Blades to have a small chance of getting elusive to gain dodge is also another defensive layer. Or you can use Vaal Haste. Vaal Grace to get dodge chance, and that is solid as well. So going into the skill gems, I have Ancestral Warchief, Multiple Totems, and Ancestral Protector, just because I kind of feel like you're forced to use these because of how big the damage bonus is from them. Going into the auras, I have Flesh and Stone, War Banner, Precision, and the Enlightened support. I have Vaal Haste for bosses. That massive increase to attack speed is quite substantial. Whirling Blades for general movement, and Blood Rage for the extra attack speed. I have Pride, Herald of Purity, Enlighten, and Blood and Sand. Unfortunately though, I didn't get level 4 Enlightens to actually use Flesh and Stone with all of the other auras that I have, so that is quite unfortunate. So for the main skill, I have Awakened Brutality. This is a pure Fizz damage build, so if you want to do elemental conversion and whatnot, honestly, I have never tried to do that, but it sounds like you get higher damage potential if you can make it work. But I have Awakened Brutality because it does the minus 10% to physical damage reduction against your hits mostly, as well as the biggest physical damage increase. I don't do poison or elemental damage, so the side effects don't do anything. Infused Channeling for the defense as well as offense. Awakened melee physical damage for the Intimidate chance. A max level quality Cyclone. Fortify support for Fortify. And Rage support, because the flat physical damage that you get from this is actually quite a bit, and it also allows you to use Berserk, which, when you need it in a pinch, Berserk is really amazing. And then I have Berserk down here, and then Punishment with the Vaal Molten Shell setup. So with the Sinvictas, I was actually going to try to do something different with the curses, and that is to have Punishment, Vulnerability, Increased Duration, and Smoke Mine in my Sinvictas with an Awakened Curse on hit, because it allows you to do 2 curses. And I have Bladestorm. Bladestorm probably isn't the best for doing a Curse on hit setup. You probably would want like a Spectral Throw or some kind of more ranged oriented attack to put your curses on. But if you can put have both your curses work for you, and having Smoke Mine for movement as well as getting across gaps, that was what I was going for. So another important thing is that when you're doing melee, especially Cyclone, you need to find a way to deal with the mana situation. So I've solved this by using Gemini Claws. Well, like I said, if you want more life gain on hit and potentially more damage, Imperial Claws are typically better. But you're going to have to find a way to get Mana Leech, mana gain on hit, or just have enough mana regen to sustain it. Another option is if you have a body armor that does minus mana cost of skills, that also works quite well. So what you could do instead of Feral's Fur, which is by far the most expensive item besides the claws, is using a rare body armor that does mana cost, as well as, I think there's a mod that does like -% physical damage reduction of enemies by hits. There are definitely options to use Sir Feral's Fur. I just like having the free aspect of the cat, as well as the free charges. So, and then for flasks, I have a Basalt Flask, which is pretty much necessary for the physical damage reduction. Lion's Roar for more damage, as well as the armor. Jade Flask for the evasion, and then a Diamond Flask for crit. And my crit multi is actually really pretty poor. As you can see here, is 239%. It could definitely be a lot better, and my crit chance, even with aspect of the cat on, is pretty low. But without further ado, let's look at the skill tree and Path of Building. Alright, in Path of Building, going down the, of course, duelist, so going over the Ascendency first, I decided to get the Conquer and Worthy Foe first. And the reason is because it increases the damage enemies take, and you don't have to deal with accuracy. And I find that accuracy is probably the most irritating thing about melee in general. So if you can find a way, either having your weapons have hits cannot be evaded, or get it from Ascendency, or something along those lines, that is a good choice. Originally I was going to go Slayer with Impact, Masterful Form, as well as Headman and Overwhelm or something like that. But honestly, I think Champion worked out much better for me. So with Conquer, you get Taunt, so if you're playing with anyone else, enemies will deal less damage to your allies, and you actually take less damage if you've taunted recently, and you get a tiny bit of life regen, so that is quite nice as well to work with that. Unstoppable Foe I did for the Merciless. That is, so when you get Fortify, you get a huge boost to your armor and evasion, as well as attack speed, attack damage, and you cannot be stunned. So even when you're not channeling Cyclone, you cannot be stunned for another 6 seconds. And then Master of Metal for the Impale, extra armor, and extra damage from impaling recently. So with combination of Master of Metal and Unstoppable Hero, that 83% armor, physical damage reduction, and 62% chance to evade increases quite a bit. So that is primarily why I chose Champion, was that extra plus 1000 armor and plus 1000 armor and evasion from Unstoppable Hero and Master of Metal. And also Impale lasts 2 more hits, so why not? And then Cyclone hits so rapidly that you should have enough impales on the enemy to really take advantage of the added physical damage from that. So going over the skill tree, I get Master of Arena, Art of the Gladiator, Mana Flows for the intelligence, and then I go down this road, and then getting the extra Frenzy Charge, Cloth and Chain, and then the guard nodes I thought was a really good choice because enemies take they take increased physical damage by the minus physical damage reduction, as well as give you armor and everything while you're under a guard effect, which is really good with Molten Shell. And then I get the Rampage nodes, the Area of Effect nodes, Impale, and everything. Soul and Steel really adds to the defense capabilities. And then with my build I actually get 90% while all of my effects are active, supposedly. So the swagger node for the block chance, and then the blade barrier for block, and then ambidexterity for the damage, charging and offensive. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that with this build you do get a small chance with charging offensive to get endurance charges. So in some instances you can get multiple endurance charges to keep your cap of physical damage reduction at that 90%. Thick Skin, Claws of the Pride for the minus 10% physical damage reduction against hits. Herbalism, Aspect of the Lynx and stuff. And then I go all the way up here to Claws of the Hawk. Unfortunately though, in-game, I'm only level 96. So my skill tree looks like this. I forgot to show it because... oh well. Maybe you'll show it after we get done with the building here. But as you can see here, Claws of the Hawk by itself is like a 10% more damage. So with this build, I'm missing out on this, as well as the life nodes on here. So unfortunately, because I plan my builds for level 100, that is definitely something. And I decided to anoint Claws of the Magpie because it increases the attack speed, and I kind of felt like attack speed was something that my character was lacking. And this also has the chance to steal Power Frenzy endurance charges, so when you have a map that says enemies gain endurance charges on hit, you can get them yourself by stealing them from enemies, which is quite nice. And then also Claws of the Hawk has chance to blind, so if your enemies, so if you get like the silent step nodes instead, that is another damage defensive layer that you can have, as well as reducing their chance to hit you altogether. And then these life nodes give me like 380 life, so my total life is shy of 5,000, and that's kind of like the biggest problem that I have with this build, is the amount of total life that I get. Most melee builds that I find have over 6,000, and to be completely honest, you kind of need 6,000 in order to not get one-shotted by the super hard bosses or really juiced up maps. My attack rate supposedly is a theoretical 34. I don't actually have the exact claws that I was using. I just have like generic claws of what I wanted. So do keep that in mind when you see the damage numbers. Supposedly it's 8 million, but in practice my damage is probably more like, with my current setup, is probably more like 2 to 3 million. So there is that. And then I think I did, let me see here. Oh yeah, when Path of Exile 2 comes out, what you can do is Whirling Blades Fortified, Nightblade, Faster Attacks, Critical Strikes, Duration, and Melee Splash, or something along those lines whenever that comes out. But yeah, so that's kind of what I thought of. Another thing that you can do for an alternate thing is have chance to bleed on your Blade Storm if you don't want Smoke Mine or Increased Duration. You can do chance to bleed, fortify, and then on Cyclone put on Bloodlust support for even more damage, or find a way to fit Maim in there. Just some things to keep in mind. So overall, this build, I did find it to be really good for the most part. The life leech / on hit rate is actually really good. Essentially, you are unkillable to anything that doesn't one-shot you or hit you rapidly. So I'm talking about like breaches or beyond bosses. They can be a problem just because of how often you get hit, but in general you're pretty much invincible to everything except being one-shotted. And then I do have a decent amount of mana hit rate, so as long as I'm hitting something, I'm gaining more mana back than I'm using, so with the Gemini Claws. And then with Blood Rage, I actually technically get mana regen when I have that maxed out. So yeah, that is pretty much it. So and then I get 62% effective crit chance, and then 300% crit multi, so not the best for crit multi especially. So instead of the Claws of the Magpie, if you want to anoint either Constitution, if that is always a solid choice, or what you could do is Disemboweling for the maximum damage increase. I'm pretty sure it's the maximum damage increase anyway, for the crit chance and crit multi. So those are some alternatives if you really want to go above and beyond. A Thread of Hope here also allows you, if you have a very large Thread of Hope, you can get Assassination, Will of Blades, Sleight of Hand, and Master of Force. So if you can fit that in, if you can find what you want to give up in order to get those, that is definitely a solid choice, because obviously each of these gives you a huge damage boost, as you can see here for the damage, especially Assassination. So that is worth noting as well. So overall, this duelist, I have been very satisfied with his performance so far. As long as you get really good weapons, which are definitely on the pricey side, even if you decide to craft them yourself, that is going to be the bottleneck for your damage output for the most part, is just getting good claws. But overall, this character I find to be really solid. And using life gain on hit with Cyclone feels really good, and I did that with a Raider before, and while she has a very high movement speed, she just does not have the tankiness this build ended up with. So he's pretty solid, and as long as you have the skills to like dodge attacks and everything for like the super bosses, I believe that he's fully capable of defeating Sirius, for an example. I have fought Sirius, I think, only once, and it didn't really go too well, but that was because I didn't really know the fight, and so there's only so much I can do on that. So overall, and then also, I keep forgetting things to mention, I wonder why. War Banner, if you remember to use War Banner and all of the Vaal skills, so Vaal Mountain Shell, Vaal Haste, Vaal Grace, Vaal Ancestral War Chief, and all that, your damage just skyrockets against bosses. So do keep that in mind, because I keep forgetting to place down War Banner for some reason, and that's a shame. But this is my second only build guide, so for any of my build guides, any feedback is appreciated, and of course feel free to modify this as much as you like. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully it was informative. And one last thing, if you have a friend that is a guardian to increase armor, Warmonger has been playing a guardian with low life, and he gets my armor up to 30,000 without me even having my Flasks on. So if you can get a Guardian to give you some extra armor, or someone with Grace to increase your evasion, it's even more solid. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.